become such a familiar backdrop of our day-to-day life that it's easy to forget what they mean. That one. That little dot right there. That's Bremen. This one over here, that's Saul. Think about that. Just a handful of these dots represents the breadth of human expansion. Another handful, and you've got Bannon, Jean, even Van Duel systems. That's everything we've ever known. Every piece of art, every life, ever, right there. In two handfuls of dots. And that means there's so much more to find. Behind every one of those points of light is a story waiting to be discovered. Now, in our distant past, it was the province of governments to explore and understand space. The simple launch took resources and money beyond the capacity of even the largest companies. But then RSI introduced the Zeus, and suddenly regular people were able to explore our solar system, allowing an unprecedented amount of knowledge to be discovered. When Nick Croshaw discovered the first jump point, the modified scanner array that allowed him to search for jump points were far too expensive for the civilian market. But once that technology was refined and open to the public, what happened? That's right, an era of expansion that led us from this to this. And that's how it's always been. If you look at all the great eras of human history, whenever innovation has put technology in the hands of the people, it has heralded sweeping discoveries. Because power in the hands of many will always exceed the power of few. So while we can now discover new jump points and systems, there's still one hurdle that remains. That's what to do once you discover a new planet. Because right now, only the largest corporations can terraform and establish settlements. Easy. We haven't simplified terraforming yet. No, I'm here to announce something equally exciting. Albert Einstein, the man who redefined human understanding of the universe, he once said, "The person who follows the crowd will usually go no further than the crowd. The person who walks alone is likely to find himself in places no one has ever seen before." An insightful sentiment meant to inspire thinkers and creators to push the boundaries of their understanding. It was, after all, said 1,000 years ago, before humanity had left our homeworld. So clearly he was speaking metaphorically. Today, as I just showed you, the unknown is out there, waiting to be discovered. For those that are looking for those places that no one has seen before, they are faced with a daunting challenge. What do you do when you get there? Up until now, it's been the province of governments and corporations to pave the way for sustained habitation. The power has been in the hands of the few. What if I offered you the ability to build your own settlement? To bring civilization to the most untamed of frontiers? A colony ship in the truest sense of the word. And I'm not talking about just transporting people, no. I'm talking about an all-in-one solution designed to build modular structures based on your needs. Capable of building a farm or a habitat, a trading post or a mining operation. I mean, that'd be crazy, right? Allow me to introduce the Pioneer. With that, let the new age of colonization begin.
And good evening, good evening, good evening, and welcome back to the Soul Citizens. I am GriffinGamingRPG, and we are happy to be back continuing our series on industrial strength. And today we are covering the Pioneer. But before we get to that, let me introduce my awesome co-hosts that I have with me. First of all, let me start off on the far end there. For me, we have the man himself, Dark Knight 75. What's up, brother?
Hey, doing all right. Another rainy day here in Chi-Town, but otherwise,
it's
enjoying
raining.
the day in, playing some 315 PTU.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, enjoying it.
How many people tried to steal something from you today?
Nobody yet.
Nobody
we'll
yet.
wait later tonight.
Are you sure you're in Chi-Town?
Nobody yet.
Someone got jacked my 400.
Listen, you know, Dark Knight's got the north side, I got the west side, and actually, and then we got Gigi on the south side. So, you know, we got the city covered when it comes down to where we at, right? That's cool, right?
Oh, I thought it'd been Gigi was in here. I was like, Gigi, where you been? I ain't seen you in 9 years, man.
You missed us. Gigi was here last month. You missed her.
Yeah, I don't believe it. I don't believe it because I ain't never seen her.
Yes, she was here. And the other great voice that you hear holding down the middle this week is the man himself, Dig That 32. What's up, Dig?
What's up, everybody? My name Dig That 32, aka your girlfriend's boyfriend, aka Mr. Turn Down Service. I'm sorry to say it like that, but here I am. So what's up? Well, let's talk about this Pioneer thing.
Yeah. We are going to talk about the Pioneer. In fact, we got a lot to cover. I was sharing with Dark Knight Dig before you got here that this show and next month's show are probably the two toughest shows. This month we're doing the Pioneer, but next month we're doing the Endeavor. And both of these ships are the ships that are probably, among many of these bigger ships, really elusive. You know, when we did the Orion, at least we had mining and gameplay, right? So, you know, we had something to work with. But now that we're getting the Starfarer, same thing, we had some stuff to work with because they've been talking about fueling. But this thing with the Pioneer, especially post this last CitizenCon, we do have some information that we're going to be able to share with folks. And while I was doing research, I was kind of amazed that this research went all the way back to 2017. It's been 4 years since this ship was debuted. And I remember, DK, I know you weren't around back then. Dig, were you around when that commercial ran, when they did that at CitizenCon? Were you around back then?
I wasn't around, but I've seen it several times. Okay. And you know what? No matter how old it is, it's very impressive, man.
Yeah, man. I'm surprised Matthew McConaughey ain't came here and got these jokers yet. Standard Dev. Yeah, Standard Dev. Thank you for kicking us off with that 1 month resubscription. He's been faithfully following us. Hey, Griff, did we miss you? Yes, we missed you, Standard. Yeah, man. I mean, you know, I remember when that commercial ran, I think I was at VerseCon. I was in Austin. And when they ran it, of course, it was the whole Matthew McConaughey thing was, you know, just, you know, right in your face, right? That was kind of cool.
That's who it was. But I was trying to figure out who.
Yeah, but you know what? But I was also amazed. Well, you know, it was Matthew McConaughey impersonating your boy Elon Musk, right? But I was impressed with the speech. I mean, the speech was actually a good speech.
So dope,
wasn't
it? Yeah. It felt like a real conference or something.
Like, you're like listening to it. You're like, he's definitely channeling Matthew McConaughey. But then at the end, you're like, he's doing a damn good job, man. Hey, how many Mustangs? Hey, baby. Hey, count our expenses up. Can we get like 3 Mustangs this month?
You know, and that, to be funny, to your point, Dig, the only thing that we knew about Consolidated Outland back then was the Mustangs, right? And they were slowly kind of being not dismissed, but, you know, all these new ships was coming out, right? And so nobody expected that the thing that Consolidated would be dropping would be this big industrial ship. You know, it really caught everybody off guard. And so I remember the reaction. The reaction was like, people were blown away. Vengeful.
Hey, shout out Vengeful.
Y'all giving us these subs. Thank you so much.
Hey.
All right. Whammer says, thank you. But yeah, man, I mean, people freaked out about this thing because there really hadn't been any big discussion about land, you know, per se. You know what I'm saying? As much as we talked about space, most of the community, I don't think, had really dug into this idea of land. And there was something he said, and Dig, obviously, if you caught it at the very end, because over the last few weeks and even the last couple of years, you know, this thing has been kind of about homesteads, right? Homesteads, building your own base, blah, blah, blah. But did you catch at the end? He said, building your own home. He said, trading post, structures. He named a whole bunch of stuff. Vengeful. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Salute, Vengeful. Salute, my dude.
Thank you. He mentioned several different things, and I know people have been focusing on the Pioneer for base building, but we're going to get into this later, because these other structures now, he starts talking about building outposts and stuff, which is a whole nother level. So, you know, I know, the reason why I got Dig on the show is I know Dig is about that paper and entrepreneurship. So I know if it's a way to bring in some cash, Dig is on it. And Dark Knight has already talked about his idea about living, you know, not just on a ship, but living in a location. So that's why I've got these guys on here with me tonight. So here's the deal. Because this is you know, there's a lot of stuff amongst all the Star Citizen information that can get lost over the years. We're going to go back to the very first panel where this was introduced. That trailer we just showed you, they showed us that trailer, and then they went into a panel that year on CitizenCon about this ship. In fact, this ship was on the cover of the program, if I'm not mistaken, that year. So we're going to hear directly from the devs what their intention was for it. Then later on, we're going to see a follow-up that was kind of like on an Inside Star Citizen, where they talk about it more. And then we're going to hear about some more updated stuff that's happened from this last CitizenCon. So if you want to get something to drink, something to munch on, these videos, they're not really long because we're not going to show you the whole thing, but we do want you guys to look at it. And then we're going to come back and talk about it, because I'm not even sure if DK has seen this, because this is early.
I don't think I have.
Stuff. Yeah. Okay. So we're going to jump into that right now. So let's, we're going to jump, I think we're going to jump off this screen. Yeah. And we're going to watch it, then we're going to come back. Okay, I think we are. Let's see. When I push the button, I'll find out what we're going to do. Okay, here we go. Hopefully this is it.
So
all right.
Some quick ship stats. The new ship matrix went live last night at some point. So we've gone through every ship in the game and updated all their stats to the best that we know of. And we're going to keep that more up to date. It's a much simpler process now. Anything you see up there with a dash is because we don't know where it's fully going to be. We'd rather give you the numbers when they're not going to change, rather than what we have in the past. It's like this, everyone sits on it for 3 years and goes, why is it not like that anymore? We'll give you it when we have some solid numbers. But the numbers we do have there are the ones we do know about. So it's 200 meters long, which is quite big. It's a capital size ship, which, if you've read all the shipyard posts we've been doing over the last 2 weeks, explains that. It's got 600 SEU of cargo, which is used for building the bases. A min crew of 4 and a max crew of 8. It supports 8 living on it, so you can just about get by doing 4. So it is a team effort to do this stuff. On the next bit is the more detailed breakdown. And this actually didn't change much from the initial brief that we did. Things like thrusters always change as we build the ships out and work out where the best place for them was. And the only bit that actually changed was the turrets. So we went from having 4 manned turrets to having 2 manned turrets and 2 unmanned turrets. And that was, as we were going over the shapes, obviously to get to a manned, or to use a manned turret, you need to get a man to that turret, which in itself creates restrictions on sizes and shapes. By taking that out of the equation, you can have much more interesting shapes and feel, and the person controlling that turret is just sat somewhere in a nice central location to use it. So yeah, that hopefully you can all see on the website now and look in more detail at it. Paul?
You're going to trust me with the clicker? All right, let's go. So this is the art side of the talk. This is a pretty good question to ask. Obviously, John's explained sort of the initial part of the process. It's, you know, the ship's, it's pretty different to what we've had to deal with before. It's been dealt with generally by one of the concept team in the UK. And he's done very well to remain sane throughout this process. So it has been very challenging, but what I'm going to give you now is a sort of high-level process of how we've approached this ship, a little bit of sort of behind the scenes, and then sort of more of an explanation of where we've arrived, how we've arrived, and hopefully you guys will really like it. So this is my favorite new buzzword that I came up with specifically for this talk. So I think these 3 lines basically describe how we sort of approach this ship. And especially with this ship, we basically, it was kind of different to the other ships in the past. So basically this one was very clear, you know, it was basically, it was utilitarian. It was basically monolithic manufacturing. It's basically, you've got a huge brick of a ship, essentially. But obviously that doesn't look cool. So, you know, we go through various stages to make this look good. So throughout the whole process and throughout the sort of whole design philosophy of the ship, it's basically an asymmetrical design. So you'll see on the exterior, it's asymmetrical. The bridge is asymmetrical, it's cantilevered, the corridors are asymmetrical, and this throws, it's basically in the DNA of this ship. And, you know, John has mentioned previously that obviously we've had the Mustang, which is one of our, I guess, really early ships from Consolidated Outlands, and not really a lot of work had been done in terms of the style guide. And really they're more of a separate division. So this is more of your industrial division. So it's kind of like the Reclaimer, which is like the industrial Aegis. So right off the bat, you know that you're dealing with function over form. It's not going to be like super sexy. It's not going to be pretty, but it's still going to have a really good sort of well thought out industrial design feel to it. So, you know, even as you're walking through this thing, you're still going to appreciate it, and you've got your own essentially flying factory. So this next slide, this basically sort of shows the sort of initial development. So what normally happens is that we always provide Chris with a series of options. He always, you know, if we give him one, he's never happy. He wants to see 3, 4. You know, the more he can see, the more options, the better. Which is great. You know, we're totally used to it. We know how to work fast. You know, that's, you know, you don't really sort of set your heart on anything, but you know, you keep pushing for what you like, ideally. So we provide Chris with all these options of how this ship can look good, but also, you know, not be a flying brick. So basically, there's a lot of transformation. We still have technical issues, well, not technical issues, technical requirements that we need to take into account with this. But at this stage, we hand this off to Chris, and he's able to then give us feedback. He's able to pick from A, pick from B, say, oh, I like the color from J, and then basically we go on to the next round of feedback. So this is where we start sort of dialing in. We've taken what Chris likes, and again, it's just super loose, super rough. You know, we are dealing with mesh work that we're just sort of crashing together. We're not being all precious about this stuff. So we're basically just going for an aesthetic with a hint of the functionality that's already sort of been sort of factored in with talks with design. And what you'll see here is like in a sort of really, you know, we've got next few slides are very sort of behind the scenes. They're sort of the stuff that that goes on at people's desks, and people are drawing on their Wacoms. And this shows, you know, you can tell this is an early one because this is actually flipped the other way. But you can see really early on that that we dialed in to what we wanted for this ship. So you've got the bridge, you know, it's very much like the bridge of an oil tanker. You're overlooking your ship. It's good visibility. You can see your whole manufacturing process. And, you know, basics, turrets, and how this is going to work. And again, these are really, apologies for the sort of small resolution. But here you can sort of, it gives you an indication of the sort of block out process in terms of the animation and the manufacturing process. So this is not a 3D printer. It is a manufacturing plant. So you're essentially you'll be taking your panels, materials, almost like IKEA, dare we say?
I would say more like a car manufacturer or something
Right,
like that.
so more like Tesla, let's say.
Yeah.
I prefer Tesla, and it definitely suits more with the sort of the video you guys have just seen. And so you can see the sort of amount of detail that the concept artist is putting in for the manufacturing plant. And basically you've got two arms, and that's basically where everything gets built, and then in the center it all gets assembled. There's a little bit of magic that goes on in there, and then basically the crane comes in and takes your pods. So this is I guess, final concept model. So we're jumping right ahead in the process. And as you can see, this is it starting to articulate. This is once you've landed and found a suitable landing site. You've got an arm that's articulating out. There is a turret on this arm, and it's also sort of providing an extra sense of perimeter to your base. The area in blue is essentially the crane, and once everything has been assembled, this crane comes in, takes the habitation pods out of there, moves it to the front of the ship, so that then there's still space for additional pods, and depending on how you've configured it. And then again, this is kind of just sort of showing you the process of where the cargo is inserted, and it basically runs down both arms, ultimately meets in the middle. And you know, as a player, you'll be able to see a ton of this going on. You'll have all the equipment, you'll have all the robot arms. It'll you know, as you're playing it or as you're walking around your base, you should really get a good feel of what's going on. Swiftly moving on. This is just some quick outlines, just sort of outlining the top view, basically, of the bridge. Again, asymmetrical feel, cantilevered design. Inside there you have habitation, which we'll see examples of after this. Some hefty landing gear, because this is quite a large ship. Additional cargo space, as well as a landing pad which is above further cargo space, and that landing pad can articulate, move out of the way. Staging area, this is where all your robots are. This is where everything is getting sort of built, essentially, from your materials. And then manufacturing is where all the magic happens. Moving on, these are some of the final images that basically have been built for this ship. So you can see the habitation pod there already. And you can see there's walkways in there, so as a player you'll be able to come out. You know, I guess if you're in a nice calm situation, you'll be able to come out and see all your cool equipment. If you're in a combat situation, hopefully you'll have more, you know, a good advantage or possibly disadvantage for firefights, depending on if you have people taking over your base. And then this is the bridge. And this is pretty cool. You can see on the sort of far left-hand side, there's a little blue monitor. It actually looks quite small, but that's actually the architect's station. So that's the console, basically, where you're designing your configuration, I guess. So you're choosing 1 pod, 2 pod, 5 pods. Moving on, rather cool engine room. You know, basically this will be a large open space. Again, asymmetrical from the top. You've got some really interesting turbines that should give us some really cool animation opportunities. And it's very different to anything that we've seen so far in the Star Citizen universe. Habitation, obviously you've got space for a couple of Big Bennies. Everybody wants Big Bennies in their ship. And then split level room, so space for chilling out, just watching TV or just having dinner with your friends. Bunk Room, again, very utilitarian, very basic, down to basics. You could, if you look closely, you can see one crew member in one of the pods, just lying down. And this is just a quick slide put together, just to give you an indication of comparative sizes. Again, you've got a little Mustang in there, which will fit on the landing pad. And finishing up, this is sort of final rendering of just showing the ship in its full glory. And it's still, even though it is utilitarian and sort of quite big and massive, monolithic, again, with this sort of graphical branding, it's kind of still giving it, we've broken up the shapes, we've given it a really sort of futuristic feel, and I'm pretty happy with it, yeah.
You want it?
Click. Yeah. So I'm now going to hand over to Tony.
Okay. So before you can actually begin construction of your new outpost, you'll need to first select and purchase a plot of land. The value of that land, what you're going to have to pay in order to acquire it, depends upon a variety of objective criteria, as well as the seller's insight into that information, which we collectively refer to as knowledge. One of the things that we track for each section of land that you can potentially purchase is the resources present and the quantity. Another one is the current market value, which will obviously impact the value of land. If the land has an abundance of a particular mineral that at that particular point in time is, exceptionally valuable, then that's going to increase, the current value of that land. But it's a very dynamic process. The level of certainty, that's interesting in that knowledge, information within Star Citizen is very often an analog concept. You don't necessarily know something or not know something, but rather you know things to varying degrees. And the easiest way that I could give for an example would be to consider a car that you're thinking about purchasing. If you're being asked to purchase a car and you haven't actually seen it, you're going to be very conservative in terms of your estimate of what it might be worth. If you're able to see it even from the exterior and verify there's tread on the wheels, the paint job looks okay, etc., then that's going to increase your perception of its value. If you're able to actually turn the car on, make sure it's running, or better yet, have a mechanic take a peek under the hood, then that's going to basically bring it even farther up the scale. And so a lot of what we're doing with the value of land, which ties over into the Pioneer, because you're going to be setting up these outposts ideally in optimal locations to exploit a lot of this value that's sitting on the surface of these planets. The next one up would be when the info was last verified. Knowing that there is a vast abundance of gold at a particular area, but the information is stale. It's 2 weeks old, it's a month old, it's 6 weeks old. As it gets more out of date, it becomes less and less valuable. And so what this means is that players will routinely have to refresh the knowledge of a particular area in order to maintain the perceived land value within the game. The last thing that I'd mention in regards to what constitutes knowledge is the value of location. If you've got a field of copper ore and it's in close proximity to a refinery, potentially at an outpost set up by one of these pioneers, then that ore field, the land that what you'd have to pay to actually purchase that land is going to rise in price. If on the other hand there's no refinery on that planet, and you have to basically spend 20 minutes basically carting the ore to another refinery and then getting it to its eventual destination, that's going to lower the lower the perceived value of that plot of land. So knowledge within the game is a really fundamental concept, and It's able to, knowledge is a concept that once you've acquired it about a certain area or a certain object, you're able to transfer that to other friends, you're able to transfer that to organizations, you're able to sell that information to public information brokers, or freely submit it into the public domain.
So yeah, Tony talks about knowledge, what it all means, but to get that knowledge, you've got to go and find that area to figure out what's there. Is it right for you? And that's where all the exploration ships come in. You could take your Pioneer and do all this with your Pioneer, but it's probably not going to be the best ship for scouting locations. We've got a whole wealth of exploration ships that are designed for finding that information out. It's like you wouldn't take your oil rig out into the ocean and just randomly dot it down until you found what you wanted. They send the scouts out to find the best locations. So the ships you mentioned there's just a small range of the exploration ships, like the 315P, Terrapin, Carrack. All exploration, all have slightly different pros and strengths. So you've got the single ones, you've got the big crews, and they're just there to help find where you want to send your Pioneer to. You might find a nice location, but if you went there in your Pioneer, you're never going to find out where the nearest refinery, like Tony talked about. You could build it and you find it's millions of miles away, and that's going to be a waste. So these exploration ships are really sort of key to finding those places.
Yeah, and one of the things we're aiming to do is make sure that there's a lot of gameplay associated with these high-level concepts. And by that I mean, if you discover, if you're working your long-range scanners, you may find a previously unknown body, an asteroid that no one else within the system knows about, and there is a level of value related to that. If you work your dials a little bit and you've got the proper equipment and the skills, then without actually having to make the journey, you could increase the potential value of that of that knowledge find by being able to discern, the mass of the object. A large asteroid is going to be, all things, being equal, be worth more than a smaller asteroid. But if you really want to ratchet it up, and this kind of goes back to the degrees of knowledge that I was talking about, if you actually make the journey to it, fly over, burn fuel, burn time, brave whatever dangers are between you and there, and you actually do a flyover the surface, then you may actually just visually see pools of hydrocarbons, gas venting from the surface, and again that raises up what you know about it all the more. If you really want to get specific about what's there and maximize the potential value of that find, though, then you're going to have to set down on the surface, and you're actually going to take core samples, you're going to basically have these processed, analyzed, and you're going to do things like seismographic surveys and have et cetera, et cetera. And so all of this plays into a common theme that we're trying to execute upon, which is all of these high-level ideas and stuff have a variety of different ways by which the player community can basically attack them, and by which these things will feed the outputs of one into the inputs of another.
So now that Tony's kind of high-level idea of what land is and how we value it, I'm going to talk about actually claiming your land. So first and foremost, claims are not tied to the Pioneer. A single person, organization can buy them, so on and so forth. Then we have the concept of UEE space, non-UEE space. If you settle in UEE space, you need to have a claim. If you're brave enough and you don't want to do it, you can venture out to non-UEE space, and then there you can find some of your shadier things that you want to do in the game. So if you do plant it in the UEE space, then the idea is that you get the protection from the UEE, in case somebody comes and attacks you and stuff like that. It will be transferable between players. Like any good government, the UEE will actually take a cut of that in a title transfer cost. We're doing general licenses. Later on, the UEE will portion out licenses. So when it comes to actually claiming the beacon or claiming your lands, you'll have a beacon. interaction. So you set down your beacon, this is where I want to go. And either yourself, one of your teammates, or a data runner will take this information to the closest UEE colony office, and basically that's when it locks in, and now that land is yours.
Yeah, so one of my favorite aspects about just the overall concept of land is actually speculation. And the basic idea is that assume that you've purchased land and you've gone out and you either bought it with foreknowledge that it likely contain these minerals et cetera, or you discovered that yourself. And so now you're holding on to this land, and the decision you'll face is, well, do I basically extract that value right now? If whatever that land contains is currently in a bear market, it's not worth very much, then you may elect to basically wait to harvest whatever it holds until those particular commodities have price. And it sounds simple, but there's a lot of ripple effects to where we get really interesting knock-on gameplay effects. And by this I mean, when you own land, that doesn't prevent someone else from necessarily going in there and extracting those resources. Now, obviously, if you're doing this within UEE space and you basically sit down and you're extracting resources from someone else's property, then that's a criminal offense, and basically the game's security system will deal with them as appropriate. But, of course, the police aren't patrolling, every square inch of every planet, every asteroid, every moon, every minute of the day. And so you holding onto that property, waiting for, a better payday in the future, has real implications in terms of, well, in addition to relying upon the system security, do you want to put your own sensors there so that you're alerted when someone else does something that you don't like on that area of land? So if somebody starts mining, you'll basically be notified, and then you and potentially your org mates can head out there and basically push them off. You may hire mercenaries to basically periodically patrol your land with a higher level of frequency than what the normal, the normal UE security forces would do. Basically, the equivalent of hiring your own personal security to, to keep watch, of your valuables. And I'm really just touching the surface here. I mean, another thing is it makes the point that you don't necessarily have to do the full end-to-end cycle in order to take advantage of this. You could, for example, buy land or discover land and then just flip the land after you've verified that it's got this, as opposed to you necessarily exploiting, mining, pulling up all of that material, which is a very particular type of gameplay that some people will love, but for other people, the discovery aspect or the security aspect, or on and on, if you have an interest in only one section of these areas, then you can still contribute to the overall equation. If you want to basically handle everything yourself, you can also do that.
Okay. So solely towards the Pioneer. And what I'm going to talk about is preparation. So first thing that you're going to do is you're going to need to do collect materials and add-ons from different stores. So you'll get materials from TDDs or refineries, and you'll be able to pick up some of the add-ons like Tony was talking about, remote sensors or extractors, solar panels, moisture extractors, geothermal pumps, landing pads, turrets, that kind of stuff. Now, what is very important to understand is, if any of you have ever done home projects, know what you're building, so that you don't do 5 trips to Hornbach to build something. So if you know what you're building, and then you know the resources that you'll save yourself multiple trips, or it will be one of those things where you'll need to have these resources brought to you. So what do you want from your outpost? What's your gameplay intent? Do you want to be a moisture farmer and live and respawn there and basically look out over this beautiful beach, or do you want it to be like a revenue generator? So basically, you'll swoop in, you'll watch over it, you'll check in, make sure everything's running smoothly, move on to your next thing. So with this, we've got investment, not only from a resource and basically game money standpoint, at time to build. not as fast as Paul's videos. So the other thing is, depending on the size of it, that will increase the build time the higher you go. Now, once it's actually placed, you're going to want to upkeep it. Depending on if you put something in Earth's atmosphere versus the Mars's atmosphere versus Venus, well, those are all different climates. And so the wear and tear and just kind of the usual stuff that we're doing with the ships, and as far as stuff breaking down, so on and so forth, this will be the same. So configuring. Now, the idea would be that you're working the architect station, you're choosing the exterior layout of it, and then from there, you'll move into the interior rooms. So some of the different interior options: habitation, armory, storage, med station, mining, refining, hydroponics. And so with this, depending on what you're doing, each one of them is going to require a different amount of power. And then that starts going into some of the add-ons. So if you're mining, or if you're doing something that's very, very power intensive, growing things, so on and so forth, then you're going to need to run extra power in there. And with the add-ons, just like with our ships, if you think of our ships as the base hull, and then you have your gimbals, you have your mounts, and then you're attaching weapons, you're attaching ordnance, you're attaching utility items. It's the same idea here. It's basically you have your base structure, and then you have these item ports, like Chris always talks about, that will feed into the ore extractors, and that's how we generate the power. So here are just some of the internal shots. I think you guys have seen some of these already. I like the salad spinner, hydroponics, different mining ideas, storage. So one of the important things is basically if you're growing plants, or if you're basically dealing with any sort of bare form resources that will feed into our ecological system, then what you want to do is you want to make sure that you're actually storing these items, and so that you're not just mining once and then basically having to shut down because you don't have any more space. Drug lab. So in case you want to do a little Breaking Bad. Then idea about research, and this would be maybe you're close to the sun or something like that, and you want to research some solar flares or those types of things. Med station. So the main thing for us has always been a sandbox, and making sure that you have the freedom to focus on the gameplay that you find interesting. And so what we wanted to talk about was just some of the ecosystems that we feel these things help support and help build. You've got the haulers and traders that would be dealing with things that would come in, and if you're mining or if you're growing plants, well, these are going to take these to manufacturing or processing centers. Tony mentioned the security and the needing to actually protect your things, because I can guarantee you, if you're making money, people are going to want to take it from you. Exploration, John mentioned this about going and finding these plots of land and everything like that. Then there's repair, obviously mining, farming, and the refining stuff. So that is our panel.
Okay. Welcome back, everybody. I saw some pretty interesting comments in the chat. I'm sure my co-hosts were kind of following along too. And again, for those of you who came in late, welcome. Appreciate you guys being here. We are talking about Industrial Strength, the Pioneer, and we're starting with the very first time we heard anything about the Pioneer. So I know there were some comments there about some things have changed, and that we know that. But there are a lot of people who never saw the introduction of the ship. We started out with the trailer at the beginning, and then we started out with the very first time we heard some details in relation to the ship. And immediately following the Citizen Con, there was an even more in-depth conversation, which is shorter. That was actually the longest video that we look at. Dark Knight, let me start with you. What were your first impressions from that video when you saw it?
Yeah, so that was the first time I've ever seen that one. Mm-hmm. So that was actually kind of fascinating to see what they were talking about then and what we know now. And I thought it was really cool that we saw like they were concepting the idea of what we're going to be talking about later with Raster. Mm-hmm. I don't think they quite had it yet, but they were thinking about it. Their idea was there. And it was kind of cool to see that the old buildings that they were using were the ones that we saw from the prefabs that we have currently right now. And that was the concentration at that time, I believe. So it's neat to see where they went, or what we know now from what we've been seeing from ISC and everything. And thank you, Ryan.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thanks for the subscription.
Thank you.
But yeah, it was really cool to see the evolution from that talk to, say, recent talks about the homesteads that we had at SitCon. Cool. Yeah, so I made a lot of notes, so we'll get into it.
Okay, yeah. Dig, what about you? Had you seen that one too, or were you up on that, or was that fresh for you as well?
It was fresh for me as well. Okay. And it was wild because I was like, uh-oh. And then when I say, uh-oh, I was like, uh-oh, this looks just like the damn Liberator. It looks like a Liberator except for townhomes. I was like, dude, man, how much rent is it to, hey man, can I get some like spare bucks so I click? Yeah, it's not what I thought it was, which is good, but it also disappoints me a little because I always wanted. I'm a big Fallout 4 fan, and I want to build my own towns, and I don't want like this little snatch and press town. But I get it. I love it.
Well, you know what? We're going to talk about that because I think that it is more than that. I don't think you have reason to be disappointed. There were some interesting things that I saw came up in chat. Some of the things were whether or not CIG would be able to pull this off, right? Will it be the ship that they claimed it to be? And like everything else in development, we know that there's a little clause down there that says these things are subject to change. Wow, thank you, MTS Turner. Thank you for the 100 bits. We appreciate that. Thank you.
I'm glad you said that because I was like, what
is that? Huh?
I can't hear that. What is that?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the 100 bits. We appreciate that. I know there's a lot of wondering, right? Because it is ambitious, right? I mean, this is not something you see in a lot of games, and it seems like it's ambitious. I believe CIG will make it happen. Now, you guys say, okay, you're being, a little bit super, but here's the deal. This thing was sold on doing certain things. And there's some things that they can retrieve back. Papadopoulos, thank you so much for that subscription. We appreciate you.
Hey, thanks for the subscription.
Thank you. But there are some basic things, and I think even in that opening piece when we did the whole Matthew McConaughey thing, they talked about this ship not just being about bases, not just about homesteads, but they talked about it being a manufacturing platform for agriculture, for a whole lot of other things. CC Creator, thank you for that Prime sub. Thank you.
Thanks for the subscription.
And so
that's what made me not trust it though, bro.
That's why.
Like, hey man, we got your one fix for everything, man. Trust us, man.
They didn't say for everything. They were very specific because they tied it into gameplay and the economy, right? So if you want to be that moisture farmer, you want to be that guy who has a farm, right? You can't do that. You can't do that in a house, right? I mean, you got to have a house, but you're going to need the facility. Now, they also have talked about that there will be prefabs that you can buy and have brought in.
That's what I don't like, man.
Wait. Some people don't own a Pioneer or don't want to go through that having to get all the raw materials. You got to remember, to do a Pioneer, even if you want something, and they're going to talk about this, you have to provide all the raw materials for it. So even if I want to hire you, say, Dig, I know you got a Pioneer, man. Could you build my house? You can be like, yeah, Griff. Just when you show up with all the stuff for it, I'll be there. You know what I'm saying? I got to provide all that stuff for you. Well, for some people, they're not into mining. They're not into doing all that stuff, but they are into maybe doing trading and making cash. And they're willing to pay to have it made by you or by some prefab uncustomizable thing that's just like a little box, but they happy with that. Some of us want to go digger. What are you thinking? Go ahead, let me hear you.
I don't want no prefab. Like I used to work in mortgages, and I don't like them little.
What you don't want to bring down the real estate value of your house? Is that what you're trying to say? Is that what the deal is? You don't want that
Stanford Press house thing bringing down my property value.
You know what that prefab bringing down your resort you're gonna build? Okay, I hear I hear you. I could deal with that. Okay.
I just want some custom, cuz.
Okay.
I don't want a stamped house.
I got you, and I think that there's going to be room for that, but it will be in time. But let's go into the next panel because they go into a little bit more detail. But those are all very good points.
This dude is good, man.
Wow, Mr. Oh my God! Thank you so much for the 5 subs. Thank you. That's awesome.
Thanks for the subscription.
Yeah, let's go ahead and look at the next part because this is where they go into it in a little bit more in depth. For me, again, I was blown away when this first came out, hearing about the Pioneer. Again, every time I listen to this, I hear that it's much more than just building a house, that there's a little bit more that's involved with it. I love the thing that Todd Pappy mentioned earlier. Did you all hear the thing when Todd was talking and when Tony Z were talking, and they were talking about all the things you will need to go get? They talked about you getting like the solar panels and the electrical things and the power generators and all that other stuff so that you can customize your joint. But
can you get a motivator for your droid?
Yeah, you can buy motivators too. You have the Jawas. Let the Jawas stop by and pick it up with their banded merchant, right?
Get your power converter.
Right, your power converters. Get your power converters. All right, let's go ahead and pick up. We're going to stay on the screen with you guys this time, and we're going to go ahead and pick up with this was at the ISC that followed right after the CitizenCon, where they went into detail on this.
At CitizenCon 2947, we revealed the Consolidated Outland Pioneer, the groundbreaking capital ship that introduced an entirely new game system to the Star Citizen universe, the ability to own and create surface outposts. To start us off for today, let's check in with some of the team working to bring this brand new capital ship to life.
The overarching kind of role of the Pioneer is it's there to create colonies essentially. It's like a big flying fortress / factory. With that kind of overarching archetype, should we say, it presented quite a few challenges both on the art front and the design front.
The purpose of the ship is to give players an entirely new gameplay element and to create a very unique experience for the players in terms of where they're going to settle, how that's going to affect the job market within the game, how that's going to affect exploration in general, which is now a lot more exciting than, oh, let's just fly to a planet and see what's there. Now you actually could do something on those planets, which is amazing.
Take loads of inspiration from real life. You have to, as the old saying goes, like everything in life is a remix. So you really kind of start with real world reference because it gives you the most tangible approach to start from. So in the case of the Pioneer, it was we were looking for more the actual function of it, a lot of kind of car production lines and really kind of manufacturing processing lines and really kind of getting under the skin of how they work, you know, where do the products to manufacture arrive, how are they processed, how does that manufacturing take place, and then, you know, at the end result, you've got this essentially an outpost that's kind of ready to rock. So yeah, it's quite interesting and challenging, to be honest.
The key features is, of course, basically the whole outpost part of it. We didn't design the ship to be a ship per se. We designed it to be a floating factory in space. So everything in and around the ship is just geared towards production and building outposts and claiming your settlement.
My personal favourite thing about the Pioneer was essentially it created 2 subset of challenges. Number one, we've got this big floating factory. We didn't really want to make a pretty ship per se. It needed to feel kind of quite aggressive, weighty and heavy. So hence you got this kind of slab construction to it, which I think is really cool. But the most interesting thing for me was really kind of how it transforms when it basically lands on the planet.
When we decided to do this thing, nobody really knew what the best way of making it work was, because there's a lot of limitations you're walking up against. Like, if we are going to make this floating factory, the footprint of it is going to be massive, which means that the landing spots need to be massive. So we decided to have the ship fold out, because that'll be, at least when it lands, it'll be massive, but when you're maneuvering it, it won't be as massive. Figuring out how the entire ship is going to fold out, and then how all the robot arms are going to disappear into the bodywork, how the production line slides in and folds around the magic box to conserve space. where all the materials go. It was a really unique and massive challenge, daunting sometimes, but definitely fun.
We've got the technical challenges under the hood of like moving vis areas and moving interiors in the ship, which is incredibly challenging. So when we were designing the layout of that, we had to kind of keep all that to a minimum. So even though the whole ship moves, really what's going on under the hood, there's a lot of kind of, should we say, magic tricks to make it look far more alive than it needs to be, if that makes sense. So then when you've landed, you're in this kind of, it is a risky situation that you're in. Like this, number one, you're in a really kind of, should we say, a ship that's probably going to be worth an awful lot to people. You're going to be tanked up on minerals. You're going to be tanked up on everything you need to create what you're doing. And then you also, of course, you've got the outposts that you put down, which need then to become another high risk, high reward factor in gameplay. So when myself and Dan were kind of like chatting about it, we were just saying, like, I kind of said, you know, it needs to feel fortified. It needs to be designed in a fashion that you can kind of defend what you're doing, not just from, shall we say, airfire. Hence, you've got the upward facing turrets when you're down on the ground, but also from ambushes on foot. So if you study the layout of the ship when it's on the ground, it kind of feels a little bit like a prison yard. You've got these kind of outlook posts with visibility over the whole ship. The captain's bridge and where the architect is can overlook that whole process, and they still have 100% visibility over the landscape that they're planting on, right? So that was an incredibly challenging but really fun thing to work on. And it kind of, once you get those first ideas in, the rest kind of grows itself, right? So that's really kind of a sign of, I personally think it's a sign of really good game development. It's all very well sitting in a room and coming up with all these ideas and saying it's going to be X, Y, and Z. What generally happens in the most successful titles that you see is that they'll have an idea, something will come through, maybe unexpected, which is the case of the Pioneer, and you just build on those positives. And that was the case with the Pioneer. We had an idea, and it grew and grew and grew to what we have now that went out into the sale. And it's a really cool, and it's something that we've never done before. It's something I don't think anybody's done before. It's really a command and conquer flying factory, but in FPS, which is crazy, but it's awesome.
The creation of the outpost is actually quite simple. When we got to it, we basically decided that since this ship is going to land and give the player such a unique experience, we wanted to feel as kind of like a home base, like a command and conquer style base that lands where you plot down, and it has to be laborious. You can't just like land for a second and then just fly off and do your thing again. No, this is an intense process. It costs a lot of money, a lot of resources, and we geared everything towards that. So this ship is not super fast, it's not super agile, and it just does one thing, and that's production. So when it lands, as you guys have probably seen, it folds open, and the two manufacturing sites basically get exposed. It takes resources from the resource base all the way through those two manufacturing lines, kind of like how things get crafted in a car plant. And then it puts them in kind of a magic oven, because we obviously, showing outposts get made is not really efficient in terms of how the engine runs, etc., etc. So we feed the parts into kind of an oven or a construction module that then takes all those parts. So say on the right side of the plant, very clearly you can see a moving line where raw materials get crafted into a door, and that door moves then through a line of production robots that give it color, weld extra little details, extra little bolts on it, attachment points, holes, and then once that door is semi-complete, it moves into the oven, and then in the oven magic takes place, and out comes this outpost, and that then gets placed by autonomous arms in a spot that you designate, basically.
I'm really happy with the way it's turned out. I think I'm really excited to see it in the game. Basically, it's going to have quite a presence when it comes down, not just from a visual perspective, but also all the VFX that are going to kick off. And obviously the sound, you know, when you're doing this procedure, you need to be lit up like a Christmas tree, literally like seen from outer orbit, and then, okay, right, something's going on down there. So it's gonna be interesting to see how the community use it.
Do you think that, this is supposed to be a high value ship, high value target, very expensive to operate? What do you think? Do you think that people who have purchased the ship, who have purchased it, do you think that it's going to be like too big of a task, like too big of a job, especially if they're not an org? Or do you think it'll be manageable? It's high risk, but it got the turrets, it's well fortified. What are your thoughts about that?
You're going to need a group, at least, whether it's an org or a group of friends or something, because that's a lot to undertake. You're going to need a staff. I don't think it's going to be possible to try and do that on your own without multiple people helping you out, especially once that thing is landed. That thing is massive. Just seeing how they said it was going to spread out, and it's just going to it looks like it might double its size when it lands. That's going to need a crew on its own just to make that ship, just to get it functional and ready to actually start building. I don't see anybody more than it has to be an org, or if it's one person, they're going to be running some kind of massive corporate, not an organization, but maybe a company of their own. But that's still the same as an org. So it's definitely going to be a ship for populace. It's not going to be one for single. Especially for single players. You can have one, but it's going to cost an arm and a leg to run that thing, and you're going to need a crew to run it for sure.
Okay. Good question. There was a question at the very beginning of the stream I want to go back to because I didn't mean to miss it. By the way, if you guys have questions, please feel free to hit the little ellipse icon, the little solar eclipse icon down there, and you could punch them in and we will respond to them. And I'm trying to remember who it was who asked the question at the beginning. Oh God, my thing doesn't want to go back that far for some reason. Okay, I lost the question. I really want to ask it. But we do have one viewer question. It says, where will people keep a Pioneer when they're not building with it? Where will it be? I mean, it is a capital class ship. And I don't know if we really have all the answers about where caps will be held. There's been stories about, you'll be able to leave them in space. They'll remain spawned. And there's other things where they'll despawn at a certain location. I don't know, especially for a ship this big, because it is a big ship.
Yeah, I mean, and it is surprisingly as big as it is. It's a surface side ship, so I mean, it's going to be on the surface for the majority of its time during building. So I'd imagine it's going to be just building, and it's just going to go from one job to the next, picking up supplies along the way, not necessarily stopping at a station for any given amount of time. And if then, probably have a tender craft to go back and forth between the station to get supplies. It's definitely, I don't know if it has a docking collar or if it has a way to dock to stations or not. Thank you for that subscription. But it's such a big ship. I don't see it sitting at a space station and, getting fuel from there. I see a Starfarer coming to give it fuel. I see Tendercraft coming to bring supplies and restock of the ship. And the ship mainly either stays in space above the planet that they're going to be working on, or is on the ground and moving from site to site. Jade said that she wouldn't be shocked if it doesn't have a docker collar. I would be shocked as well. I mean, it should have one, but
capital class, I would think it's got to have something, because it does have the landing pad on top, but I would think that there has to be. And I mean, it's funny because I tried to see if there was like a PDF, one of those booklets that was put out for this, and I didn't see it. And maybe I missed it, but I tried to find something that had like some detailed specs and designs, and I couldn't find anything completely on it other than the drawings that they've put out on the website. So maybe there is something. I don't know. Okay, well, thank you for covering that. I want to go ahead and jump into the part 2 to this, because there was further discussion that goes into the whole thing about land claims, and they talked about that in the first part at CitizenCon, and they also had some stuff to say about that too. So let's hit that next. Okay.
Now, no surface outpost is complete without some place for it to call home. And that's where the UEE land claim licenses come into play. Thanks to the enormous scale of our planets and moons, there are amazing opportunities for players to stake their claim in the Star Citizen universe. In a very special feature for ShipShape, let's check in with no less than Dave Haddock, Aaron Roberts, and Chris Roberts himself to learn more.
So we've heard a lot about the Pioneer, which obviously we introduced back at CitizenCon. But also one of the things which really interests me, and is actually one of the things that more than interest really excites me about the game mechanics going forward, is what actually comes with the Pioneer, and that's the right to claim land. But that's something we really didn't go into much detail about. So I'm basically now joined with Chris and Dave here.
Hey guys, how you doing?
And we're going to talk a bit about that. So I guess we'll just sort of kick it off a little bit with, okay, what exactly is this right to claim?
Well, okay, so when we were designing the Pioneer, well, actually this all sort of came from our original procedural planet tech. So once we started to bring it online, we were like, wow, I mean, look at, because previously it was just going to be one landing location, maybe two landing locations on a world that you couldn't actually walk around. So you would see it from orbit, you would say, oh, can I land? And then we'd sort of have a cinematic that would bring you down there, and then you could walk around a small sort of first-person level of the landing location. But the moment that Marco and all those guys started to bring the tech online, we're like, wow, okay, this is amazing, because we'll be able to have whole world, planets, moons that, you can walk all over and are rendered at, the high level of sort of first person detail that we're going for in Star Citizen. And so at that point, we're like, okay, well, there's a lot of land. And so and then a planet or a moon is going to feel pretty empty if you just have one location that you go and visit on it. So, we've been very focused on things like, okay, well, what other things can we do on the planets? Building out the ecosystems, distributing resources. We really want to push fauna, so there could be dangerous wildlife there, or creatures you could hunt, or would attack you, or gold or minerals, or all sorts of stuff you could find and harvest. Even maybe areas that you could farm and grow crops and sell them off world or whatever. So we want to basically create a lot of gameplay for the huge amount of land that is now available in the game to play. And so that was really one of the genesis of the Pioneer in the first place, was like, we built these outposts to populate the moons and eventually populate other worlds as sort of these kind of small pioneer outposts, so to speak, first footprints on worlds. And just from an art standpoint or a design standpoint, we're building tools to help us populate those, but it's a huge amount of land. So we were thinking, well, one thing that would be very cool is letting players go find a spot of land and build their own outpost, and let the players almost join us in helping build this world. So yes, us designers and artists are building out the major locations and even secondary towns on some of the more populated planets, but wouldn't it be cool if we had some virgin moons or planets and players could go there, and then they could start to set up their own, like their own little homestead, or them and some friends get together and make their little organization base. And so that was the genesis of the Pioneer itself, which was like, okay, we probably want a ship that you could go and you can sort of be a base builder. And then we were thinking, well, like the whole, the gameplay of Star Citizen, besides the various, default tropes of science fiction sort of, space sims, which is trading or space combat, being a mercenary, being a pirate, exploration is one of the biggest things that, I think a huge amount of the community want to do. And, from our standpoint, our goal is, not to sort of go to thousands of different star systems that are just a different random number seeded sort of set of planets that you just sort of see from a distance. It's like, you go down onto the planet and you see it in this beautiful detail that's sort of rendered, we've been saying crisis level or beyond. So, really tactile. You can touch the trees, the leaves, the plants. You see the wildlife moving around, all that sort of stuff. So we sort of have that. And the exploration aspect of it is, well, yeah, let players discover it. So it's not so much about how many star systems you can hit, but, what about mapping these planets or seeing these planets, or going to see, like what would be the location to put your perfect homestead, or, where you're going to build your farm, or, where you're going to settle. And so our focus on exploration is almost more in the sort of more specific detailed areas. And so we were thinking, well, we really want to take that and this idea of settlement, why don't we let players, instead of us you go to some department or you basically say, oh, I'll take tract 52 on this moon that you're selling land on or whatever. We didn't really want that. We wanted to make it active for the player. So the player would go out and essentially scout for where they want to settle and where they want to put their base. And they basically discover it, fly around. It's all gameplay. You do it in game. You don't automatically get a place. You got to find your place, stake your claim to it. And then we also wanted to make sure that we had a system in place because the concern would be, okay, well, I go build my base and I log off, and some asshole comes and blows up my base when I'm logged off. And so we sort of came up with this idea of this land claim mechanic, and the Department of Planetary
Development Bureau.
Yeah, Planetary Development Bureau. And the idea is, so you could go to a world outside of UEE space. You don't have to have a claim or do anything. You can build a base or whatever, or hang out there, or mine resources there. But it's completely the Wild West. So some other player can just come in and try to take it from you forcibly. You've built a base, you log off, it could get attacked. So you'd have to worry about defending it all the time. But if you went and had an actual official Planetary Development Bureau recognized claim, so you went to a place, you placed your, what we're calling a sort of land beacon here, and you placed it on this plot of land, and then you go and file it with the Bureau. They recognize your claim claim, it's filed in the UEE records, and then now in UEE space, you're basically protected by them. So if someone attacks your base or tries to take it from you, essentially they'll be, become an outlaw or a criminal or wanted. So you have the protection of UEA when it has a land claim mechanic. So we thought that would be a really cool way, and so we decided we came up with this sort of gameplay mechanic, and then we said, okay, well, that's how, as a Pioneer owner, you will sort of claim this spot of land and make sure someone's not going to troll it, and then you go, claim it, file it, and then build your base, and that's where it came from.
Right. And so, in terms of the mechanics, so get into a bit more detail. So you go to, I guess an office somewhere, and then, so what happens then at that point?
Yeah, and also it sort of expands beyond, Pioneer ownership. Like this is basically an opportunity for anybody to kind of claim their tag.
So basically in the, as we get, because we're going to build out this mechanic because we need it for the Pioneers, but the idea would be in the game, you could go to the Bureau and, pay with UEC money to do a claim on, like basically go out and set your place or homestead on a moon or a planet, then you could do it, right? And we're thinking about potentially having one where you have a claim and then potentially an option to lease, because having a claim right may be expensive if you're just starting off, but just like everything else, it's like if you're buying a house, sometimes you lease it or sometimes you rent it.
But sorry, just to be clear, so the mechanic is you go to the office first.
Yeah.
You basically say, I want a right to claim.
Yeah.
And then once you have that, then you go explore.
Yeah, they issue basically they issue you a certificate and then basically you go out
and a beacon. You get this beacon, so you can put it in. It can record the area that you're
plot.
Claiming. It gets electronically transferred to whatever is some kind of data chip, and then you take the data chip to the office after you've set your claim and give it to them. And if no one else has claimed that same land, it's recorded in your name, and now it's legally yours.
Okay, so what happens if someone else is trying to claim at the same time?
It's a race.
Yes,
it's a great race.
So that's true. This is why data runners could come in. So if both two people decide, oh, this is a perfect spot, it's whoever files it first is going to claim the land. Of course, there's so much land out there that I think there's plenty for everyone, but there probably will be some cases where someone scouted and said, oh, this is a really rich resource mine.
Or a beautiful view.
Or a beautiful view. And by the way, that's what happens that was kind of what happened in the land rush in the Wild West as well. So we kind of wanted to emulate that. That's the whole idea of the Pioneer, sort of emulating that sort of expansion westward and the land rush.
And the sort of physicality of having to go out and just...
And making it gameplay, right? So players are actually physically doing this and doing things in the game to achieve things. And even in some cases could be in opposition with each other or whatever.
Yeah, right, and so you could go in, you could say buy 10 claim rights in one go, you could throw them all together if you want a lot of land, or you could space them out in different areas, or if you're, I don't know.
So we haven't considered, we probably wouldn't limit to you just one claim license, because we're basically calling these sort of claim licenses, and so you have a license to claim a plot of land, and yes, you could probably buy a few of these in the game. Like, for instance, some people may concern about building their outpost, but some people, like if you're just a miner, like one of the reasons why it's not tied necessarily to the Pioneer is if I'm a miner, I don't really care that much about building myself an outpost. What I care about is I want to secure an area rich in resources. Oh, look, there's great minerals here. And then I want to mine it. Well, of course, if you have a claim to it, you're sort of protected. Otherwise, you can be mining this resource and a bunch of other people can be coming in and trying to take it from you.
Right. And so the claim is for everything above and below ground. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. That's the idea is, I think, we've currently been playing with the idea of two sizes. One's that's sort of 4 by 4 kilometers, which is a plot, and one that's 8 by 8 kilometers, which we call an estate. And if you're a Pioneer owner, you get with the ship the materials to build one outpost and an estate claim license. And then so you have to go and find your place in the game, claim it, register it, and then build your base. But if you're a miner, for instance, you may just be, okay, I want to get a bunch of different plots, and then I look around, I'm scouting on this moon, and there's a really rich mineral seam, and so I'll claim that, and then that could be mine to harvest. I don't have to worry so much about someone else harvesting, because if it's in UE space, you'll be protected. It's just like getting a license to mine in today's world. So we wanted to put some structure in. That doesn't mean that you couldn't go outside of UE space and just mine without a license, and that would be fine too. It's just a bit more risky.
Right, and I guess also if you're looking at land in certain ways, obviously we have stuff like the prospector and so forth, where you want to go and actually find out. Obviously, if you just go and claim some land just because you think there might be minerals, it may not be the wisest thing to do.
Oh
anyway.
yeah, no, you definitely no. So definitely you would in terms of going and scouting your land, like things, ships like the Prospector, some of our more sort of scanning science-based ships like the Aquila, those would be kind of the ships you would go. And if you're looking for rich resources and minerals, you'll be using them to be doing deep scans on the moon or the planets and finding where the resources are. And we're going to, this is actually one of the focuses of going forward into next year, is to try to work very much on sort of things like the mining mechanics and stuff like that, and resource management. And it will be persistent resources. So if you go and find a seam and then you start mining it, at some point you'll probably mine it out and you'll have to move on to another one, and we'll record it persistently for the moons and the planets. But they'll all be distributed. There'll be resources on, most of the celestial bodies. Some will be richer than other ones will be. So our hope is to create a lot of gameplay besides just say someone building his own outpost. They, like I said, they could be mining, or they could say, oh, this would be a good place to farm, different kinds of crops that then I can go and sell to other people for a profit. So we're really trying to use this land and let players choose what they want to do with it, whether they just want to hang out with a base or create a farm or create a mining installation.
I guess you could even, create a refinery, because there's a lot of miners near you, and you can say, hey, if you come to my refinery, I'll charge you a bit more than the usual, but because it's right next to you, you have to transfer.
Longer term, definitely. I'm the first stage, having all the extra bit. I think we're just starting with an outpost, and then there'll be some add-ons like mining kind of nodding donkeys or some hydroponics and stuff, which we have in the outpost now. But yes, definitely we would start to, have more variety of, kind of modular building stuff you can do, like the outpost. And one of them would be, building up more of a little refinery, or building up, your sort of farm. This is the direction we're going to be going for, sort of a bit of a crafting economy, where you can see the resources of this universe and players utilize them in different ways to earn money. So yeah, you could earn money being a badass mercenary, but you could also earn money being a great miner or a good farmer.
Yeah, I guess also you could also, like I said, be a mercenary and protect people's bases if stuff like
exactly.
That as well.
No, that's what we're looking at. I would say that even in the case of you've got something protected by the UE, there certainly will be people that want to operate outside the law that may want to come and steal stuff from you. And so I would definitely think that some of the bigger places or installations would be more sort of organization centric. I could definitely see an organization getting together, sort of building their own little settlement. Different people can log on at different times, and they're basically running their operation. So this is one of the fundamental parts of building that tool set for players, and I'm really quite excited, because it has a lot of agency for a player themselves, because we don't know what they're going to do. We don't know where they're going to put stuff. So it can be really cool. It's going to be a combination of what we're putting down as designers and artists and what players are actually creating.
Well,
So
also, if they move into a system and they populate it, enough, then they're going to bring in more UE presence, and there's a lot of things where you kind of like bring this sort of stuff, and it may come turns from a border place, to a much more populated level.
Yeah, they shift the direction of the.
better. Super excited by it. I mean, I know Marco and Tony are both very, very focused on all this aspect because, it's kind of the model that we're going for, which is we're trying to go really deep. We don't want to go we're not going so wide, but we're trying to go super deep and just allow a lot of opportunity, and then just natural behavior will come out of players interacting with each other and interacting with AI, and all the systems and rule sets that we have will, I think, make a pretty interesting
Cool. And I
universe.
just wanted to just reinforce to make sure I'm clear on this is because obviously, you are talking about, with the Pioneer is quite, it's quite an expensive ship and so forth, but but you literally will be able to, as a player, if you want to, get in your Aurora, go to the office, get your claim, and then just fly anywhere you want to go. And if you're just really interested in getting a beautiful vista over a lovely lake, you can go there, land, and stake your claim and do.
Totally. So I mean, the idea is that it shouldn't be tight. It just happened that we had to come up with the mechanic for the Pioneer because the Pioneer was going to get, build your base, and we had to figure out the mechanic for it. But this mechanic's for everybody, and it shouldn't be exclusive to people with big super capital ships. It should be for anyone. And, because you may not actually even want to build a base. Like I was saying, if you're a miner, you may just want to secure some land for you to do mining, or perhaps you build a piece of land and then you hire a person that has a Pioneer to come and build you your place. And again, that's cool because that's players working with other players, because that's something going forward into next year. We've talked about the service beacon, but the next level with what we're going to do is in 3.0, you have all these missions you can get. But they're all sort of generated by the AI, and some of them are generated by the system based on player actions. But the next level will be player missions where you're like, hey, I'm stuck in space, come rescue me, or I need someone to be my escort. And that's kind of what we're talking about, the service beacon. And again, this would be the same thing. You'd be like, hey, I need someone to build me an outpost on this moon or something like that. So I'm super excited by that.
So of course, once you own it, then you've got a right to sell it.
Yep.
So one of the things I was just thinking about is if a bit of a property developer, you go in, you search out, you find the most amazing location, and you just buy the land, and then someone else comes along and wants that location, and you could flip it for more UC.
You could go there, you could build it, and then you could flip it for even more. No, totally. So like generally in Star Citizen, the goal is what you think, what happens in the real world, we're sort of doing an approximation of on all levels, and so there shouldn't really be any one specific profession you need to go in. Like there shouldn't be a definition of win in Star Citizen, because win is however you look at it, right? I mean, some person's version of winning could be being the best trader. Someone's version of winning could be being a great farmer, or some people just like to putter around and make some money doing cargo runs, or they want to be a badass pirate. I mean, so what we want to do is create the tools like in the real world, where like your definition of whether you're a winner or not is totally up to you. It's some people, I help people. I feel I'm a winner, or I'm the best athlete at this sport. I feel like there isn't any particular one way to go, and we don't want that in Star Citizen either. So it's just creating this really deep sandbox that allows people all these tools to essentially live a virtual life in our universe, and I think that's going to be pretty cool.
Yeah, sounds cool to me. I've got no more questions there on this kind of and stuff. I'm just looking forward to that's like I said, to me that's what we're really looking forward to is this mechanic coming online, and we'll be focusing on it. So
yes, I know. I think we're just 3.0 is almost out. But from our plans that we're working on, our big focus, I know that like you and Tony and Todd, Paul, and all the what we're trying to get this coming year and beyond is really focusing on diving down into more of the gameplay and the functionality. So we've got a lot of the bones now in place with what's in 3.0, but really polishing out and adding more gameplay features and functions and more things to do and more ways to interact, more ways to bring your friends into the game, and that's pretty cool.
Cool. Well, thanks everyone, and thanks guys.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. I can't tell you how much the idea of carving out my own little section of the Star Citizen universe on some moon or asteroid and calling it my own excites me. And for those of you who are worried about us, running out of room, did you know that if all 1.9 million current Star Citizens today got a land license, there'd be room enough for them all on a single planet in our universe? And that's with like half the planet to spare. Even the larger estate-sized parcels. That's a big universe.
Alrighty.
Awesome.
Yeah, I kind of kept that last part in that he mentioned because I know there are going to be people wondering, are we going to run out of land? And that statistic that he gave saying that, and mind you, we have 3 million people now. We were at 1.9 million at that time. But he said even then, that wasn't even half of a planet, let alone when we start talking about all the moons and planets in the system. So in other words, there will be plenty of real estate. I think that's pretty much what they're saying. Give me your thoughts about what you heard about that in relation to, the whole thing with land claim. I'm curious to know what you think.
Well, the first thing that kind of came to mind, and Jay brought this up, is that it reminded me of Second Life and land claims when that first began. They were selling for big money, and you could buy them and resell them. You can hack them up and sell pieces of them off to other people. It was just, and I can see that almost happening in Star Citizen, but possibly, we had talked about and NFTs a lot, and that could be a way to buy and sell land or lease it to other players or other groups.
So let me ask you this. Do you think there's a danger, even though there's a lot of land, right? There's things that they call prime real estate, right?
Yes.
And do you think that CIG needs to leave the market open for dominance, or do you think they need to put a restriction in? Because let's just say, I don't know if there's going to be any buying on like the major play, like let's say Terra, right? I don't know if there's anything like that. But let's just say that there is some moon or planet that is just, it is the most gorgeous thing, right? There are some people, now mind you, and by the way, for those of you who are wondering why we're talking about land in relation to the Pioneer, let me tie the strings together. When the Pioneer went on sale, they also put land claims on sale at that time too. And people who bought a Pioneer, they got a land claim as part of their package. So they got an 8x8, 8 kilometer by 8 kilometer package that went along with their ship. You could, though, even if you didn't buy a Pioneer, you could either buy a 4x4, 4K by 4K, or you could buy an 8x8. At that time, the prices were $50 for the 4x4. And I think $100 for the 8x8. There are people, DK, and you know this, who have the money, who will go in and drop $10,000 on land on a moon or a planet, right? Okay. So in real life, people do that, right? But at the same time, does CIG allow that to happen? Do they put a restriction on and says you can only buy 10 parcels at the most, or you can only buy 5 parcels every quarter? How do they protect that so that, the people who just happen to get the drop and have got the money? Jade said there are people that'll drop 100,000.
Yes, they will.
You know what I mean? So
it's a hard thing, Griff. It's a hard thing because there are people out there that will drop that kind of money and hoard land. Is CIG going to allow that? I don't know. If they get into the process of being able to lease out from, thank you, Jalop, for that subscription. If they get to the point of leasing land, that is going to be something that will be a problem for somebody who's just spent $100,000 on a planet. Basically, and then they're going to piece it out for a lot more money. At the same time, it is a business, so so there's that. But I think they might leave those big purchases. Maybe they should just tie them to orgs and say that an org will be able to purchase, to say, a 32 by 32 piece parcel, of land, as opposed to an 8x8. The larger the org, the more possibility of getting maybe a little bit more land. But I don't know. That's really a hard one to think about right now, is how they're going to do that.
Yeah,
because it's an iffy situation when you got real money involved.
Yeah, there's here's an issue too, right? There's the person who buys land because they literally want to do something on it, right? Then there's the person who buys land because they're doing it on prospect, right? Or the possibility of value of the land going up, right? Or the person who wants to flip, the person who basically wants to work as a real estate person, right? It's like, I paid this much for it, but I'm going to charge, but this is prime land over here. This land is by the lake. I'm willing to sell for you at 20% markup. Maybe the land is not so close to the lake. I'll sell it to you for 5% markup. And then that's how they do their economy. That's how they make their money in game, right? Now, for some people, they may be willing to do it, right? I mean, people do it right now with something like a domain name, right? Some people will actually pay that stupid money to somebody who's bought the name ahead of them because they really, really want it.
Really want it, right?
So,
exactly.
you know, I guess my thing is that how do you have a certain aspect of free market and allow the players to have that creativity? And at the same time, make sure that the game remains equitable so that people can have access, you know, and not that moon that has the greatest sunrise and the greatest lake on it. You don't have somebody who comes in and buys 80% of that. I mean, that would be a ridiculous amount of money.
That would be ridiculous, but they might try.
but what they might do is buy the land around all the best lakes, right?
Yeah.
They may do that, right? I mean, you know, not oceans, y'all. I said lakes. They may buy the money because of the economics of being near water. You know, if you want to build some type of hydroponics, I mean, there's some value in doing that. So I don't know. I'm just kind of curious about that.
Speaking of hydroponics, they said it twice. So are they hinting at something?
Well, you know, agriculture farming keeps coming up. Hydroponics, you know, this stuff keeps coming up.
Yeah.
I remember when vehicles first came into the game, and people were and CIG was talking about introducing vehicles, and there were people in the Star Citizen community who pushed back on this whole idea of moons and planets being a big thing. You know, their idea about Star Citizen was about space. It was about being in space. It was about maybe combat exploration, you know, things like that. But that idea of, you know, this emphasis or focus being around being on the ground again, it really, some people didn't really embrace that so much, right? And now that we've had vehicles and things come out, people are kind of warming up to it more. And now that we're talking about homesteads, I think people are warming up to it in the sense of missions, right? But the Pioneer is beyond about missions, right? It's about people being able to set up. I'm not going to rent at ArcCorp. You know, I'm not going to live on my, you know, my Connie, but I'm actually going to have a place on the ground where I'm living, and I need to have that built. I remember when I played Galaxies, there were people who, that's what they did. They ran their business. They did everything. Like they had like, let's say they made clothing, right? Or made weapons. Yeah. They did it on a moon somewhere, and that's all they did. They would go into town sometimes, but beyond that, they didn't care about being out in space. Do you think Star Citizen's going to do the same thing? This whole thing with having these residences. I mean, will people literally, that's where they live. That when they log into the game, they're at their crib, you know what I mean? And they're at their hydroponics place, and that's all they're doing. They don't really care about, maybe they'll go to a space station one time for supplies or something, but beyond that, they're waiting on their Banu merchantman to come to give them some stuff, and that's it.
Exactly. You know, you got your Banu Amazon truck coming to drop off your goods. You know, that's people will live on homesteads. There will be people who have absolutely no interest in flying a ship. They will get on my Starliner, and I will take them to where they need to go. They'll get off on vacation, do their thing, and get on another Starliner and go right back. But they have no interest. They'll travel by vehicles towards, you know, between each little outpost town or whatever that's on their moon or their planet, grow their crops, you know, craft their goods and sell them on, you know, on Fast Cart's Banu merchantman. He goes and picks them up and takes them somewhere else and sells it. I could see absolutely being a thing. People, everyone, like Chris had actually said in that talk, he said that people will be able to, it's winning is based on the individual is what it is. So each person has their own idea of what they are doing to win. And for some people, that is winning. Just having a homestead, setting up a farm, and doing something simple like that. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
And actually, there was one thing that I wanted to bring up. MTS Tuner had made a really good point about what we would see with something like the Pioneer. And he said he'd imagine just seeing a large a convoy of
I saw him say that.
you know, fighters and carriers and huldies all just going out. Absolutely, I could see that too.
It would be
I
cool.
could see just going out and finding a moon and saying, "This is ours."
Yeah, that would be cool. It would be cool to see. It would be. Moriar, by the way, thank you. We did get the link. I took a look at it. That picture I had seen. I didn't see it in the publication, so thank you, because Moriar sent me a copy of the 2017 program booklet that had the Pioneer when it was debuted. What I was looking for, Moriar, was you know how sometimes they'll do like the brochure, like like when you're buying a car. I was wondering if they had put out anything like that for the Pioneer, and it looks like they hadn't. But even on that picture, which was kind of an early drawing, they didn't show anything about a docking collar, and that was the reason why he sent it to me. We were trying to see if there was some location for docking, but it didn't show up on the. I looked at it while we were watching that, and I didn't see anything.
And granted, we're very early. That was a very early look at the ship itself. And considering what we've seen with the other ships, especially the Nomad is a really good example because it is Consolidated Outlands. And when we saw the intro video, I saw hints of what the Nomad, of the Nomad in that original picture with the orange, floors and the angler, angler walls and things like that. So, but obviously it will be brought up to current ship standards, so I imagine docking collars and all of these other kind of things will be added at some point in time. Absolutely.
Good point. Let's take a quick look. We're talking about this land ownership. There's a sign there that says trespassers. Basically, you'll be shot. Okay, so we'll see how that goes. But they have talked about being able to protect your land, whether the UEE puts out some type of, something in the law system kicks in. They talked about that person gets crime stats. They said they're not going to be hovering over your plot of land, but there will be some type of ramification. I think either Chris or Todd or somebody talked about these sensors or Tony, he said that you could put in your ground, and if somebody comes to your land and starts doing something, you'll get a notification saying, hey, there's somebody digging a hole, in that gold mine that you're trying to do. So I'm curious to see tech like that. I mean, people are kind of worried about whether the ship is going to do all this building. I'm looking at what is once it's built, all that stuff that comes along with it. They've talked about defensive turrets, whether there's some type of AI. Like right now, we've got the new turrets that we saw at CitizenCon this year that are protecting bases. Is that one of those things that we'll be able to go into town and buy and have those installed on our base? So if somebody does decide to come in and wants to attack my base or whatever it is, that's a point defense system that's in my home. Let me jump to this real quick because they showed these a little bit, and this is kind of a greater detail. There are these land claim stakes that they said. There were two of them. This is the one that is for the 4x4 made by GeoTrack. The small print is in Gray Cat. By the way, Gray Cat produces these. That's just interesting that, good old industrial Gray Cat is the manufacturer for these. But there are two versions of it. There is the GeoTrack, and then there's the GeoTrack called X. And this is the one if you have the larger plot of land. And basically, it's supposed to be able to penetrate any type of ground or rock that you need to stick it into. Chris alluded to the fact that once you do that, there will be like a chip that's inside that you will pull from it. And I guess it's your little microchip or whatever. And then that's what you would take to go file your claim once that's in. And then I guess this thing will activate or whatever. And then, it's a sensor to let people know when you're hitting your area. The other thing that they had, by the way, this stuff came out when the Pioneer came out, gang. So if you're wondering where it was or how come you've never seen it, it's because when the Pioneer came out, these were the marketing tools that they gave us to let us know about it. DK, I don't know if you can read that. My screen is small. I could do it if I have to. Can you? But this is for the 4x4. Could you read that to everybody?
Okay, let me read this out for you. It is this certificate entitles the bearer to claim a single piece of UEE declared territory of 4 kilometers by 4 kilometers in size for the purposes of residential, commercial, or industrial development. Territory must be filed with the United Empire of Earth Planetary Development Bureau as an uncontested land claim along with compatible geographic data of desired parcel in order to be claimed. Once approved, the bearer is entitled to all rights tied to this parcel under the United Empire of Earth's Articles of Development Section 36-AI-9 and shall be the legal tenant of that property and enjoy all rights therein.
All right, so that's your quote unquote official document.
Yeah.
That one, like you said, is for the 4x4. That one there is for the 8x8. Okay.
Yeah.
Basically say the same thing.
Same thing. Yep, says the same thing. You know what it reminds me of, Griffin, and I'm sure some people can in the chat probably can say this. If they played No Man's Sky, you put down a base computer, that's your base, and you turn it on, and it opens up the signal, and it claims 300 by 300 piece of land, and that is yours. That's kind of what that reminds me with the Gray Cat, or the beacons that they put down is doing that. And he also brought up something else: data running. Yes. That's where one of the things of running data, they need to get that data of claiming that land as soon as possible. Get an MSR. Fly it to the next location to register that land as quick as possible. I noticed that. That was great. That was really good.
You know what? If you ain't got an MSR, you get that Herald, brother.
Yep. Better.
I mean, I'm just saying there are going to be those people who that's their gig, right? Because you could imagine a group of people who say, as a group, as a collective, right? We want to let's build Soul City, right? That's by the way, that's what we're gonna call our Soul City, all right? We're gonna build Soul City now. I'm telling y'all that now, right?
Soul City,
all right, we're gonna build Soul City, all right? And you got 4 or 5 friends that are doing something, and you want to get those tags in, right? So you what's the fastest way? MSR. Whatever the case may be, but you want to be able to file as quickly as you possibly can. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. That's good stuff. Let's see, where are we at right now? We looked at that. Let's take a quick look at a couple of videos that they put out. And these are we're just going to talk about these a little bit. One of them is on outposts. Let's see, I'm trying to remember what this was from. I think this was from ISC, if I'm not mistaken. And this is showing, this is when they were first showing us what the general outposts look like, right? These are the ones that are named after the different manufacturers, the ones that we have in game right now. And there's a variety of configurations, right? But it's a little kind of boring, right? I mean, other than maybe changing the paint on them and configuration, that's about it. But we get it. This is where it all got started, right? One of the things they talked about, Todd Pappy talked about, was being able to build these different types of facilities, right? Not a bazaar, what do you call it? A trading post, right? Or a lab, things of that nature. Do you think that they're going to provide, we've seen props, right? We've seen props in relation to the residential stuff. And we've seen it in the sense of like, and we're going to show structures in a little bit. Do you think that this stuff though will be viable in game? Like you can actually go buy that horticultural drum and put it into your lab. Is that what they're going to allow us to do? You think? Because because the Pioneer doesn't provide that, but do you think once you built the base, you got to put stuff in there? Do you think
I would imagine
they
should give us the opportunity to do it. I mean, if I wanted to build a hydroponics lab, I want to build it and have the equipment in there that I want to have in there. Okay. As opposed to like a preset. But from what we were looking at, and we'll probably get to this when we get to raster, it looks like some of that will be pre-built, and perhaps smaller items that we can purchase to put into those particular units. But say if it's like a hydroponics lab, it has to have this type of greenhouse set up and this type of refrigeration or this type of conditioning and things like that. But you can decide on what type of like a bearing or you know what I mean, just like different brands and things like that, or different types that you can put into the hydroponics, different plants, different veggies and things like that. But the hard equipment is actually preset. So it's like, this is a hydroponics lab. It has this in the middle and this on the outside.
Ongoing work of our colonial style.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut in on you. I was trying to set it up, but here we go.
The 2D concepts turned into 3D concepts. And that was a big step in helping us visualize and evaluate the direction we wanted to take them. What you're seeing here is the next step in that look dev process, where we've now taken the raw, very rough 3D concept meshes and brought them down to a planet in Engine, similar to the way the team reviewed 3D docking concepts by sticking them onto existing space stations. Now, it's important to note here that these are still concepts, and that the process of building them into viable in-game assets has not yet begun. So let's set our expectations accordingly.
Let me stop there. I'm going to let it run. Do you think CIG will give owners of a Pioneer the capability to have variety of design or just the modular look? Because obviously the value of that ship will be pretty serious if you can not only pick that square box, but if you can also pick that curved domed type shape, or the one that looks more futuristic, or the one that looks more rural. Do you think that there's a possibility that the Pioneer will churn out even different type, not just, you know, a lab or a trading post, but an actual different looking lab, different looking trading post?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was like when I first saw this and comparing it to what we saw with the Pioneer before, and it was just the prefabs, and seeing this, I was like, we have to be able to do that with a Pioneer. It would behoove them to not have that ability to have different types of designs and styles and things like that you can build. Maybe each Pioneer specializes in a style. So maybe one is specialized in building prefabs. Somebody might want to just build prefabs, so they stock their ship with the blueprints for prefabs, the equipment for prefabs, materials and things like that. But then there may be another person with a Pioneer who wants to go more custom and do more customization like this.
That's interesting that you said about blueprints, because maybe that could be another aspect of, you know, if you want to have your place look a certain way, you know, as the owner, you buy the blueprint, and then the person who uses the ship, all they need is the blueprint to produce whatever it is you want. But of course, you got to have the materials that match up to whatever that blueprint is, right?
Exactly.
But I love that idea. And I know there's some people who still think that, well, building, you know, so it was a space game. But I'll tell you, you know, we've been monkeying around in No Man's Sky, right? And people have talked about how not just that, if you're into some of these survival games, people spend a tremendous amount of time building where they're going to live, right? I mean, a lot of time building where you're going to live. And because of things such as weather, dynamic weather, bad conditions, you need to have some place that you could be safe, right? A place where you can store your equipment to be safe, right? Do you think that building is going to become much bigger than most people talk about? Because people are still talking about combat and ships, but do you think that, you know, this whole thing about living somewhere on a moon or a planet is going to grow as this, you know, this tech starts to get closer and closer to us?
Yeah. I think when people think about, there's a very large sect of people that are interested in the aspect of living in the game. And actually having a life in the game that is not just the typical, oh, I'm going to do some combat, I'm going to grind trading, I am going to, you know, do this or that. They just want to live in the game and have a sense of a community in their area with their groups of people and things like that. So there is going to be, you know, Second Life is a thing. And we always talk about Second Life in space when a lot of people talk about Star Citizen. But the truth is that there are people that are interested in that type of gameplay, and this homestead, these kinds of outposts, feeds that kind of creativity. Where I could see somebody with a Pioneer completely just selling themselves. I'm going to build your custom home and help you design it and do all of this kind of stuff, and you're going to pay me this much, and that's how it's going to. You know, people will make a real good living off of this.
Okay.
Absolutely.
The other thing that we'll look at real quick is these structures.
Let's check in once again with the team working on colonialism-style homesteads. And we have some additional
Thanks for the follow.
Thank you for that follow.
Found throughout the various encampments, like these cooling stations for enormous server racks, power plants with varying arrays of subcomponents like antenna, piping, displays, ladders, and more. Fuel tank arrays with a variety of blockouts altering the way in which they connect with one another as they expand out across the horizon. Solar array add-ons for both the power plants we saw before and habitat buildings themselves. Refinery units. And finally, potential blockouts for combining many of those aspects into outdoor storage yards that will form the basis for a wide variety of NPC and player experiences in the future. Now we'll start learning more about how these homesteads will begin being integrated into the persistent universe in the coming months.
Okay, so we're still looping this into the whole thing with the Pioneer. Once you have built your place, DK, it's not like you're just going to go in and turn the light switch on and the lights are going to come on, right? I mean,
how you're going to need it all,
right? Okay,
water supplies, food supplies, everything. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
No, go ahead. No, what were you going to say?
No, I was going to say when they were showing all of these items for like the power plants, the storage, and things like that. You notice, some of them are gas storage, some of it is liquid storage, and things like that. We had a conversation quite a while ago about when they were showing the water tech and the rivers and stuff like that, of being able to refine hydrogen out of the water. And store the gas, say, in one of these gas tanks and sell it, as a profession. That would be something I could easily see somebody doing with these kinds of buildings, these storage units that they have there. And power, obviously, solar power is probably going to be the bigger thing. So, lots of solar panels you see there. There might be players that sell solar panels.
Let me ask you this. Do you think that the Pioneer may ultimately be a means to even build some of the things that we just saw on the screen there? Some of the items. I mean, they've talked about being able to purchase some things and have them brought in. But do you think, like that server tower? I mean, because what they said about the Pioneer is this: they said that you have the ingredients, all the raw materials. They track through, and then there's this big center section there that they call the magic oven. Right? You don't really see something being assembled, but as long as you have the resources and material and they're fed in there, whatever you dial in and say, this is what I want to have made, it will open up and then that thing will be there, right? Then the crane comes along, moves it from that inner part of the ship and brings it out and allows you to place it wherever it needs to be placed. Then you can go back and make something else and you can start connecting them. So these different items, I'm just curious, some of them are pretty big, right? But the Pioneer is pretty big too.
It's big itself, right?
And so some people have already talked about, Fastcart mentioned to us earlier that when the Pioneer came out, it was $750 if you bought it War Bond, and then it was $850. And the question becomes, with this being a capital ship, with it also not being out yet, we already know that there's going to be a price increase, right?
Yes,
but
there
if
will.
This thing, mind y'all, this is some theory crafting, so bear with me here. If this thing is more than just about houses, if this thing is about, and they said it's manufacturing, that's how they defined it. It's about manufacturing. If this thing is now able to build the solar panels you need, or a generator that you need, those things that you need to complement that homestead, right? What do you think the value of this ship may become ultimately, if you had to take a shot at it?
If we're talking real money dollars?
Yes.
Oh, good Lord. Well, if it's at $850, it's probably going to be $950 by the time we get to IAE. After that, I don't know, man. It could go up to well over $1,000 if that's the case. Depending on, a lot of it will depend on what they're planning to do with the building mechanics, and as they tell us more information about what it can build, the value will completely go up. Absolutely. Ramar says $999.99. Don't forget that part.
Admiral says that included the land claim, but I'm going to be honest with you, Admiral, I don't think the land claim was a part of the purchase price. I think that was the perk that was given to you for buying it, because you could still buy them separately. So I know what you're saying. You could deduct it. But my best guess is the price of the ship is $750, and it's not because of the land claim. So maybe you're right, but I kind of get the idea that was just like the bonus they threw in, like when they throw in a skin, they don't charge you extra for the skin. It's just part of the motivation to get you to get it. But we'll see, right? Time will tell.
Yeah. And like you said, with these kind of things like these power stations and things like that, if they give that ability to have multiple, again, blueprints of different things like these. Maybe it's different pioneers that specialize in those types of equipment. So one pioneer specializes in power equipment and manufacturing equipment and things like that, and then another specializes in the homes. And the sky's the limit when it comes to something like this. But it's like we said, we're theory crafting. We don't 100% know, but we're getting a better idea as time comes along, especially now. We're seeing some action.
Well, for those of us who played Eve, we remember that there were certain things, if you wanted them in Eve, you had to get a blueprint, then you had to get the materials, and then it was a matter of time for things to be built. And so I would think it would be very cool if, when I wanted to have a refinery, because I want to do mining on this particular moon, right? If I wanted to get a refinery that I'd have to go purchase from the mining people or whatever, some type of blueprint, cost me money to get this blueprint. I see what I need off that blueprint to, you know, materials wise. And now I've got to go get those materials, whether they purchase them or mine them or however I get them. Then I deliver them to the person who owns a Pioneer, say, here's the blueprint for this. Here's the materials. I need you to produce this for me. That would be really cool from an economy and also just kind of a motivation of things to do. At least to me, it would be.
Yeah,
it would be
absolutely.
To me. Yeah.
It drives our economy, and you know, Quanta's going to be a thing, obviously, and you know, when that goes into effect, the prices of materials are going to drastically affect the price of your building, you know, that you're going to have constructed, and you're going to have to seek out who's going to be doing the building, and am I going to get the right price for it, and am I going to get the materials to be able to do it, and, you know, and all these other kind of logistical, and we go back to logistics, it's a logistical thing, trying to get this put together, and it's going to be interesting to see how players make this into its profession that's going to grow to be. It's really fascinating. I'm fascinated. I'm really, really fascinated about this. And anybody that has a Pioneer, I just want to get on it and just watch. Jade says she has one, so okay.
Okay. All right, let's take a quick look. As we talked about earlier, we're getting near the end of the show here. They were talking about Rastar at the last CitizenCon. Right, this new technology they have. Oh, I know what the question was at the beginning of the show. Someone asked about whether they would have land deformation if you place things, and the answer to that is yes. They've showed us that with the tools previously, but even now in Rastar, they're going to show you again. You'll see the land surface deformation when they place something that's kind of automatic. And they've talked about an overhead view, a whole bunch of other stuff on how they're going to be able to place things. But let's take a quick look at the piece on Rastar, okay?
Hi, I'm Morgan. I'm a tools programmer from the Planet Tech team, and now I'm going to talk about Rasta. What is Rasta? Rasta is our work in progress tool for planetary locations creation and edition. The name stands for a mix of RTS, the game jaw, which takes the inspiration from its map editor system, and Star, as well, you know. Its goals are to replace our previous placement system based on prefabs to a better object container-oriented solution. As our previous system was based on prefabs, any changes to location was source of issue, as it needs to re-enable a whole set of data to have things like missions or shops to work again. With this new system, any change will be easily manageable and won't require us to redo work when a change is made. Plus, as it's now object container oriented, it can be used for outposts, caves, or even derelicts, and more. It works as a modular system where locations will in fact be made of small elements that will be placed just like you do in City Builder RTS editor. And in a matter of minutes, we now have a new location where we can now create a bunch of cool gameplay. Let's go to Mark, who will tell us about the connector system.
Thanks, Morgan. So, I'm Mark. I'm also a tools developer for the Planet Tech team. Do you know what's better than placing everything by hand? Not placing everything by hand. In order to do that, we use what we call connectors. Basically, artists create small parts of homesteads that we can then snap together. Every part is modular, so we can interchange multiple ones in order to have procedural homesteads. Every change is very simple. We can change like the whole inside of a homestead or only a building that is a part of the homestead. In that way, it's very easy to make a lot of different buildings. Once something is connected, it is considered a part of the whole. So it moves as one, it can be deleted and changed, and it's basically all for connectors. So back to you, Morgan.
And last but not least, some of you might have noticed that the UI is not looking quite like an engine UI. And that's normal, as it's based on our in-game UI tech building blocks, and that for a reason. While today it's being used by our developers, one day, when it's ready and been roughly tested internally, we'll make a version available to you, the player. And Rasta is what will make you a pioneer.
Love it.
All right, DK, he dropped that hint at the very end.
Yep.
Any
Yep.
thoughts? Any thoughts?
That had everybody's ears perking when they did that at SitCon. We were all together just having a watch party. We heard that. We're like, whoa. Yeah. So this is where we were talking about the change that happened from that SitCon of 2947 to now, and what the evolution is, because it seemed like they had the idea then, and now we're seeing the results of what that concept is coming to. And it kind of reminded me a little bit, if you remember StarCraft. In the early days, we would build out your base before it got raided by the AI, and you would lay down your spots and set out, a strategy of, your entrances, your exits, things like that. But when you put down a piece, it would modify the land around it. And I see the same thing here. My question is, how will that translate to the Pioneer? I'm interested to see how that's going to work. So, we go back to that blueprint idea. I get a blueprint to a Pioneer. The Pioneer takes that blueprint and puts it into a raster, and then lays out the homestead or settlement in raster. And then is the Pioneer just going to go and drop down and hover over each base and lay down a building, or lay down some other construction unit that they're going to put down underground? Like you said, was the baking. We don't actually see that. So I could see, say, the ship lands down and puts down a piece. We may not see it, but then it rises back up and the piece is there. I'm just interested to see how that works. But we're definitely seeing what their thought process is behind this, as implementing the Pioneer was probably a challenge on its own. And this is a development of that challenge that they're coming to figure out now, as we go further along. And see what they were doing right there in that video is adding in that center section. It looks like it's prefab, put it in, and then design around it. So yeah.
I'm to your point. I'm curious. They've talked about the fact that even if people don't own a Pioneer, that you'd be able to, again, purchase certain prefab things, have them brought in, and place them. And they were kind of showing us that was what the Rastar tool would allow you to do. And you could obviously see how it could be implemented in some form with the Pioneer as well. We've seen this, I remember it was like about 2 years ago when they really showed us the tools of how they were able to place things in the game. And obviously it's been refined even more. I think they said even now it's at the point now where even if you put two buildings next to each other, two items next to each other, all the connections, everything happens, right? So they've tied it in where the power cables, if you put a solar panel thing there, all the cables will run to it. All that great stuff will be there. I mean, it puts a lot of possibility. And that's why I know there are a lot of people who are skeptical, because it seems like, oh, this is just too much. Can this thing actually do all this? But they've told us that they have this tech, and they have it together. It's just a matter of when it comes into our hands. They have said that initially everything will be based upon NPCs in the beginning, right? The homesteads, things of that nature. But then eventually these things will be moving into our hands. Now, I'm going to say this. Pioneer introduced 4 years ago, right? I don't think it's that far off. I don't think it's that far off. So either. And what I mean by that, it may not be at its fullest capability, its fullest potential. But I think that obviously if the ship is introduced into the game, it would make no sense to put that ship in the game if it cannot do some of what they said it's supposed to do. So I think it's going to be, it's not going to just come and drop off some prefab. I think if it's in the game, it may be able to first do tier 1 or tier 0 buildings in the beginning. Maybe it's just those modular pieces. But I think over time, as tech goes and development goes, hopefully it will move to that place where it's not only doing homes, but it's doing the labs, it's doing the trading posts, it's starting to even do those technical support buildings and facilities that you need to make your homestead or make your base or just make your simple farm, right, what it needs to be. So I'm
and
really
as we're getting to
about
expand, we're getting ready to go into new systems pretty soon. And having that ability to set up bases in a system, say like Nyx or Pyro, where you only have, you are able to just get a piece of land, just go and sit down and say, this is mine.
Mm-hmm.
That is, we're going to need that.
Yes.
And Pyro is going to be very limited as far as places to stay. And there's going to be lots of land available out there. So people are going to be trying to claim it. And they're going to be fighting over it too. But I agree with you. I don't think it's that far off. I mean, how soon are they thinking they can get rastered together? I mean, that's really the killer part. I mean, how far along are they with the ship? Who knows? Who knows? But the programming for raster is there, and they are definitely working on it. So they cannot be that far off.
Well, the thing is this too, right? I mean, as the universe expands, right? As the systems expand, that means there's more real estate, right?
Yeah.
And so obviously you're going to have in the beginning a lot of people kind of centralized around the systems that we have in our hand right now. But as time goes on, I think that there's always going to be some beautiful place to live, and CIG is going to obviously have to balance out some dynamics of what's around that people can access and get to. There are going to be some people who want to be remote, right? I mean, they literally want to be remote, because obviously the more remote you are and the less prime real estate you are, the less attractive your place is to somebody, right? I love the fact that they talked about how the scanning ships, the scanning capabilities of like the Aquila and some of the other exploration ships will help you determine what's that prime land before you bring that Pioneer in, because those scans are not just going to be like right now, we've just got the surface rock scan, but Chris said deep scanning, so that we know what's underneath the surface. So now when I do that land claim, boom, I drop it in. Now I'm calling up DK or I'm calling up whoever and saying, hey, I need to hire your thing to come in. I'm curious to see how long it takes to build too, because
that's a good thing. That's a good question.
Is building is a building over a period of hours? Is it a I'm assuming depending on the size of what you're building, right? Because the Pioneer is in somewhat, even though it has very good defensive capabilities, it's also somewhat vulnerable when it's on the ground. So I would hope that it doesn't have to stay down for 12 hours. You know what I mean? Hopefully it can get in, and in 30 minutes or an hour, it can produce what it needs to do and get out. Plus for gameplay's sake, right? You don't want to have people sit there for 8 hours trying to build your house,
Right.
But we'll see.
There's going to be that guy that's coming up. Hey, I'll do it for you. If you want it done quick, you got to pay me an extra $100.
All right. We can speed up the process and so forth.
Speed up the process.
Maybe so. Okay. Well, listen, we covered a whole lot of ground on a ship that is not in game. So we hope that we've had a very...
We theory crafted the hell out of this one.
Yes, and we had a very lively
but we had
chat.
really good information though.
Yes, we had a very lively chat, and folks shared a lot of good information. And I'm already excited about the possibilities of this ship. I'm trying not to buy one. There were only 2 ships left that I was interested in. It was this one and the Nautilus. Who's that? Olu Wavex. Thank you so much.
For those subs.
We appreciate that. Thank you. And by the way, Citizen Kilroy and Django SC, thank you all for the follows. Again, if we didn't get to acknowledge you, we appreciate you all too. There were only 2 ships, this and the Nautilus, that I've been still hemming and hawing about, and I can't figure it out. The Pioneer is such a specialized thing,
It is very much so. You gotta really want to be in it.
But it's so cool. But I don't know if that's going to be my deal in the long run, DK. I don't know if I'm going to do it. So anyway, let's talk about what we got coming up. Why don't you fill them in on Thursday, and I'll fill them in on Sunday.
All right, so Thursday night is Soul Talk. That is 10 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. Central. I don't have the UTC time in my head, but I should figure that in-game time. Jade was talking about that, just in-game time. But that is Thursday, and that is our call-in show. And we usually talk about ISC if we have one. Otherwise, we might just talk about stuff related to Star Citizen. That is a call-in for all of you. So if you come to our Thursday show and you would like to chat with us and participate in the show, you can join our Discord, and you can come in on Thursday at any moment in time. Just ring on in and say hi, and we'll be glad to have you. And so come on Thursdays. Again, 10 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. Central, and 7 p.m. on the Pacific Coast for all of you Western Coasters.
Absolutely. Thanks. And yes, next Sunday is going to be, as many of you know, It is Halloween, October 31st, and we, as last year, we did a fundraiser for St. Jude Children's Hospital where we did a it was a simulcast? It was a reenactment.
Yeah.
It was a reenactment of the radio broadcast of War of the Worlds, H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds, and we had a really great time with that. We raised $2,000 for St. Jude last year. This year, we are doing a Fright Night where members of the Soul Citizens team and guests and people will join us on stream to play co-op horror games. Some of those games will be, and we're going to let you guys pick which games we play. We're going to do Lunch Lady, Phasmophobia, Labyrinth, or Devour. And so during that time, we want to raise money for Games for Love, which is a charity for distraction therapy for kids. And it's a really good charitable organization. And we hope you guys can not only join us, but that you will also support us for that. And all monies are going to go to them on next Sunday. So hopefully you can join us for our Fright Night. And you know what, DK, we've got some cool music that has been created specifically for this show by the guys at New Soul. Yes. And ladies, guys and ladies at New Soul.
We got a trio there.
Yes, so we are going to be pumped about having some cool music for that day.
Yes.
Arkin, thank you for that follow, tapping us off in a good way this week. Thank you for everybody who subbed. We're at 35. You guys did great. We didn't hit our goal this month, but that's okay. We appreciate it because all the monies that we bring in, we know we just spin it right back out and do some giveaways. And we'll be going into November next month. So we've got IAE coming up, and we definitely want to do some cool giveaways during that time. And we're going to be looking forward to that. So
awesome.
I think that is it, DK. I think we are at the end of the night. We appreciate everybody for hanging out with us tonight. Look forward to seeing you guys either Thursday or Sunday. And as always, we're going to go say peace, love, and soul. We're going to be rating Dark Hour 717.
Dark Hour.
So when you guys get over to Dark Hour, give a shout, give a yell, let them know you came from Soul Citizens. And if you like what you see, follow. And again, till next week, peace, love, and soul. See you guys later. Have a great week.
See you soon.